a lot of when we did our emergency podcast, it was a lot compared to just like, because it immediately comes out what they paid. And obviously Schefter had written the Rams. So it was clear they just got into a bidding. They just got into a bidding war with the Rams. Like that much. It's not even debatable. It's a fact at this point.
Well, Schrager reported, you saw the reports on the numbers.
No.
Well, that the Niners, the final trade was what? 2, 3, 4, 5?
2, 3, 4 this year and a 5 next year. Right.
And I think just the Rams offer was 2, 3, 5.
And remember,
they didn't have a fourth.
Well, remember, we figured that out live on Thursday night. I just typed in Rams 2023 picks, and they didn't have a fourth. So it was clear. I mean, they could not match
and
that
Schefter
offer.
Tweeted initially with the Niners and the Rams in the tweet. So we knew that it was down to the wire.
Yeah, and then as time goes on and you start to see the whole picture, they got a couple 3 comps. And they also have, if D'Amico gets a job, hopefully the owner doesn't watch today's game, they'll get more comps. Like, I get it. But part of this trade, like this week was going to be hard. The dude literally showed up at lunchtime on Friday. But to help out, obviously, their young quarterback, but just immediately this guy, hand him the ball. He's a good player. Like you saw today, this guy can really play. He can make guys miss. He can catch the ball. He can run inside. He can run outside. He's going to be a really versatile chess piece for him. But they already have really Deebo Samuel. They kind of have Deebo, the version at wide receiver, and Deebo, the version at running back. And they're kind of, it's like
buying another pair of pants in the same pair of pants, a different color.
Yeah. Like I'm watching the game today and, this guy got hurt last week. He didn't, he was in and out of practice this week and he battled through it. But let's just give McGlinchey somewhat of the benefit of the doubt
I thought he looked banged up today.
Acknowledge that he's playing hurt.
Yes. Yeah.
But he's an average player to begin with. So how do the 49ers get a right tackle? Well, because we know they don't have a first-round pick, so most of the good tackles go in the first round. Now they don't have a second or third-round pick. I mean, they got comp third-rounders, but maybe they could have packaged a second and third to get up in the second to get a tackle if they let McGlinchey walk. Now they're kind of stuck. And you see today, McGlinchey's a liability. Because he's a liability when he's healthy, and when he's injured, he's a shell of himself, and he's a shell of a player. Like he is a negative, and you just start going, well, they do have some other issues at some other positions, as you see. Who knows? Eric Armstead and Kinlaw may never come back. Is that fair to see? Kinlaw may never appear again. His career could just be over because of the knee. The knee.
Well, I'll tell you the way I operate thinking about this team is not waiting for him. When if he were to come back for them, great, but I think you have to operate like he may not.
Armstead's season could be a wash, right? He just might not be able to battle through it. He's injured. So does McCaffrey really change it for him that much? As you saw today, they're fine with Wilson. And I understand that he's hesitant with young running backs. And I think Ty Davis Price jumped off sides today on a play, which not ideal with your running back.
He was the only one to commit a penalty.
That's true. Both third-round offensive weapons jumped off sides, and they do not play offensive line. They play fucking running back and wide receiver. But it's cool. From a standpoint of it's fun to watch. I'm glad Christian McCaffrey is here. It's fun for our business. But just if I take the emotion out of it and take the business side out of it and just look at it, if the equivalent of if the Rams would have done it, I'd have been yeah, I mean, I get it because they're desperate, but this is kind of crazy business. I just think it's, yeah, I don't think it's quite reckless when you factor in. I think I used that word, but I do think it's. I don't know if the impact. I would have much rather done this for a different position.
Yeah, I mean it's
the money, whatever. I don't even care about any of that shit.
We debated how badly the Niners needed running back help the other day, right? And I do think they need it. Maybe need is strong. They could really use it this year. And obviously they try to justify the trade by saying it's not just about this year. It's going to be for multiple years.
Which is true because he's under contract and a lot of trade deadline or trades that happen are 1-year rentals. That's what's unique about this deal.
But to your point on this situation at right tackle, it'd be like if you got in a car accident and you had multiple injuries and one was a broken arm and one was a fractured foot and one was a scrape on your forearm. And you address the scrape on the forearm first. Yes, they could use help at running back, but that's not the biggest problem that they have. And you have to use assets. If you were just spending money to get a running back and it didn't subtract from the fact that you were also going to spend money somewhere else, then so what? in baseball, historically, deals are like that, where you pay somebody 75, you pay Barry Zito a bunch of money, or you pay whoever, but whatever, as long as you're going to spend money on other people and the cost your overpay here doesn't prevent you from overpaying somewhere else, then who cares? Like, ultimately, that's on your owner's checkbook, on his bank account, but it doesn't really matter. Whereas for the Niners, it fundamentally matters. And the question is, how much better are you getting with Christian McCaffrey? And how much can he really help you if you're not buttoned down in the other areas? If your offensive line is going to be patchwork, okay, I guess you could argue, well, McCaffrey helps make up for that a little bit. But to me, even if he's the best running back they have, and we'll see, I mean, he is the most skilled, dynamic running back they have.
For sure.
How much? But you've got a coach who gets the most out of all his running backs. Like, Kyle Shanahan's problem is not squeezing every ounce of juice out of a running back. He does that really well. Like, in fact, the $9 million or whatever you're paying Kyle Shanahan, part of that is like, we never have to spend money on running backs because he's just gonna, he'll use a bunch of third-round picks on them, but whatever.
15.
15 million. But he's going to squeeze every ounce of juice out of the running backs. I saw Ayuk had a quote just on Twitter after the game, like, we got too many good players on offense to be scoring 23 points in a game.
He ain't wrong.
But only one ball, John. You can only get it to one person at a time. So, I mean, it's cool that everyone's out there. Every defense that plays a Kyle Shanahan offense accounts for the running back, whether that running back is Jeff Wilson Jr. or Christian McCaffrey. Whether that running back is Elijah Mitchell or Raheem Mostert or whoever, like, Kyle Shanahan is part of the running game, right?
Well, I just think
now, again, I'm excited to see him. The place was juiced, and he clearly brought some energy to the team, but that's temporary. Like, you got to go as a team, you got to win these games. And
I just think your stabilizing force in football, if you're not going to have a Mahomes or Josh Allen, is going to have to be the line of scrimmage. A couple times a day, one thing that stood out to me, like when the Chiefs just ran normal run plays, the Chiefs have a good offensive line. I thought that they shoved the Niners right off the line of scrimmage. And obviously, I mean, the Niners don't have their big beef is hurt. And how do you find these defensive linemen? Well, in free agency, they cost a shitload. I mean, DJ Jones, what did he just get? 3 years, $30 million, 20 guaranteed. And he's just, he's a solid player, but he's not like some Pro Bowl guy. And then offensive linemen are very, very hard to acquire. And I just think that when you get a toy on a team that has toys and that has produced toys, right? They created Kendrick Bourne. Juwan Jennings, like, you should be able to find another one. You just drafted 2 guys in the 3rd round. I like watching sweet players as much as anyone listening and as much as any 49er fan, as much as anyone excited. Christian McCaffrey's fun. Like, no one argues that. You just wonder if it was like, it's what we talked about on Thursday night. I don't like being desperate because you're like trying to flex with someone else. And I know John used the term that, like, get back to his Tony Dungy days when he played for him, was like, we worry about us. Like, I'm calling bullshit. Like, if ultimately it would have cost this to go to the Bills, maybe they still do it, but I wonder if they're as likely to do it. Because I think the quarterback thing,
I think they're less likely to do it if the Rams are not involved. Now, ultimately, I do think on a basic level, it would have cost them less if the Rams weren't involved. They're bidding against a desperate team.
Don't you think the good teams were like, yeah, we're not paying that?
Yeah, because the Bills obviously checked out. The Bills like, wait, we're the best team in the league. Do we really need to do this?
Well, the Chiefs were involved too, I heard.
Okay, they're always kind of involved, aren't they?
Because it's a unique opportunity. A lot of coaches in the league are going to like this guy. You're going to get this guy under contract. So I get it. Like, you got to factor that in. But, like, he plays running back, and we can't just go. Now, he's a versatile running back, but it's not fair to go pretty universally. If you just talk to someone that follows football, they'd be like, it's like they understand that running backs, and it's not just like the mid-range jump shot doesn't have value. Because I argue, well, if the guy can fucking nail mid-range jump shots, shoot him all day long. Everyone kind of understands, like, yeah, man, you can find running backs. They've all seen it. The Niners starting running back last year in the NFC Championship was a 6th-round player who we all went by, like, midseason. Got like, God, Elijah Mitchell's pretty sweet. A couple years ago when they made the Super Bowl, it's like, Mostert and Breda. Fuck, no one had heard of Mostert. He'd been cut like 7 times by the Browns, And Breda was an undrafted free agent from Southern Miss, or I forget the school, but it's like no one heard of that guy. And I vividly remember seeing him at a training camp practice make an unreal play, and I made a little note. It's like, well, I'm not going to get too hyped. He's an undrafted free agent. By midseason, you're like, this guy can play. And it happens over and over with this family. And that's what's weird. Like, a huge part of this story was the family connections, right? It gets back to like John talking about throwing Ed passes in practice and Kyle Idolite. It's not just we knew him. It was like, we know these, like John Lynch laughing about being at keg parties when they first started like making out, Ed and his wife. So it's like, oh my God, I wonder if they were a little too close to the fire. And on top of that, the Rams, every single person in the history of business, and football falls under this because that's ultimately what this is business, capital allocation, says the worst deals always happen in desperation. You know, when you're talking about acquiring other things. And sometimes when there's desperation, like Arthur Smith's dad down to his 50 grand had to go. He was desperate. I mean, sometimes you literally are desperate, right? Like Matt Rule, he was kind of desperate. He's like, fuck, don't have a quarterback, get Teddy Bridgewater. Trade for Sam Darnold, that didn't work. Trade for Baker. Like, I don't blame him. Like, what? I guess maybe he could have traded for Jimmy Garoppolo, but they were all desperate moves, but he was desperate. Belichick always just, I need a quarterback. I'll just wait. And Mac Jones there. It's like, well, Bailey's happy and Mac gets to come back, kind of. We'll see. But he just never feels that desperate when he runs his football team. And I think sometimes the 49ers, we'll see how this plays out. And same to the Trey Lance, we won't know till we're talking in 2025. But sometimes they make moves out of desperation that aren't just like, well, they traded up to 1, right? No, they traded to 3. They traded for Christian McCaffrey. It's like, well, are we thinking straight? Sometimes it just feels like they're not always thinking straight, I guess.
Yeah, I do wonder.
With pure clarity of like, would you guys do this if this was the off season, you were taking a deep breath, or you're like in the heat of the moment in the foxhole, right?
Yeah. I mean, I do think one point I think to make is that I think Christian McCaffrey helps them more if Trey Lance is on their team than if Jimmy Garoppolo is. Like, the part of the problem here, right, is that the Niners have a fundamental problem that we've talked about for years on offense.
And we both like Christian McCaffrey. We are in agreement with anyone listening. He's a sweet
I was
player.
more excited to watch the game because Christian McCaffrey was on the 49ers.
And I audibly screamed a couple times when he made some sweet plays. Like, fuck yeah, Christian. Like, I'm rooting for the guy.
Yes. But I texted you at one point today. I said, well, I don't know. The Niners got down by a couple scores. Like, well, okay, this is a great spot for the Princeton offense because that's what the Niners offense tends to be. Is what I mean by that is 9 things have to go right? The Niners answered the Chiefs' 3-play touchdown drive to start the second half with an 11-play field goal drive. Like, it's just 3-play touchdown drive, 11-play field goal drive. Like, that's the whole thing right there. McCaffrey helps you more if you could actually open the field up and push the ball down the field. And now you get McCaffrey in even more space. But
what if Ray on the kickoff returns didn't get tackled at like the 12-yard line? Would that be a good start?
Would have been ideal. Again, Niners special teams, as the internet likes to say, John, problematic.
I got a couple Hightower tweets today.
I did too, which I do love them. You started that, and I still love those.
Didn't Christian McCaffrey used to kick return to Stanford?
Oh, yeah. In one of the most bizarre kick returns in college football history, he got tackled by the Oregon State punter, Adley Rutschman.
On a kick return?
Adley Rutschman, I guess he'll probably be the rookie of the year in the American League this year for the Orioles, was the kicker at Oregon State one year.
Oh, because he had a powerful leg.
And
But he was their punter?
He was their kicker. It was a kickoff.
Oh, I thought you said the punter. It was a kicker.
Kicker. Did I say punt?
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It was a kickoff. Yeah.
And he also played baseball.
And at the time, Bryce Love was on the team. He was trying to kick it to Bryce Love, but Stanford did this thing where they at the last minute switched where the guys were standing. So he pooched it. It goes to McCaffrey because everyone's trying to keep it.
That's pretty good college backfield, huh?
Yeah. Everyone's trying to kick it away from McCaffrey. Anyway, but the point is, the fundamental problem the Niners have is they can't move the ball down the field quickly. Their explosive plays generally come in the run game, which is great. I mean, McCaffrey can be an explosive. We saw flashes of it today. A couple times I thought he was going to break off a touchdown run, a big one. It's what they do. And so in that sense, he helps them, but he doesn't solve the fundamental problem of their offense. And not to run in circles here, but the fundamental problem of their offense is not solved until they can throw the ball down the field. And Jimmy Garoppolo is just, is not capable of that. They cannot go blow for blow with you. The Princeton offense means they've got to be able to string together 7 to 11 really precisely run plays to answer your bam Juju, bam Kelsey, bam Hardeman touchdown. Like, it's just, they are not capable of consistently playing in that type of game.
I don't know if this is sustainable.
And Christian doesn't solve that problem for them.
Well, I don't know if it's sustainable, and only time will tell. But Seattle implemented the Rams offense, the Niners offense. And really, when Pete did that, he didn't want the McVay Rams passing offense. He wanted the Shanahan run part of the offense. And now this guy was drafted higher than any of the Niners running backs. I'm not counting McCaffrey on this. But they draft Kenneth Walker, who you see, I think either last week or 2 weeks ago, Penny, the San Diego State running back, who they once drafted at the end of the first round, I think it had kind of resurrected his career and was playing well. He shattered his leg. And even Pete, I remember reading a headline saying after the game, like, I'm just gutted for the guy. He had really turned around his career.
Come back. He had just that week done a press conference in which he was like, it's so great to finally be healthy.
Yeah. So they were like, they basically, now they had drafted a guy in the first round, and then they taken Walker in the second round, right? So wouldn't you say that's a lot? Now, his first round contract had run out and they had resigned him on a 1-year deal. So they had invested a lot into that position, and it was clearly going to work. And now Kenneth Walker was picked 41 and is really good. So if he can stay healthy, like Kenneth Walker was, let's face it, Michigan State is terrible. And looking back last year, their team, he was their fucking best player by a mile. Kenneth Walker's a stud.
Yeah.
But you can find really good players and just kind of ride them. And the Niners did. Now, granted, he's injured, right? Elijah Mitchell. I just wonder fundamentally at that position, like the reason Pete Carroll's career really took off once he got Russell Wilson, because they were already equipped with Marshawn Lynch, who had been drafted in the first round by the Buffalo Bills, but it had gone terribly. And I'm pretty sure that he was traded for a 4th-round pick. So
Marshawn say motherfucker on ESPN last night?
I mean, of course he did. Like, what do you guys? Everyone's like, yeah, he swears. And I didn't even totally blame him. It's like, but I would say, hey, Marshawn, you guys were so sweet. Like, this team is so boring. Like, it was you and Deshaun Jackson. You think no one can name one guy on this team. Casual college football fans in the South could name players on your team. Like, did you see the video that went viral of Stanford Stadium yesterday?
Well, I mean, I saw Stanford Stadium yesterday. I don't know. I didn't see the viral video.
It was pretty ugly. But I mean, that's a lot of people were making fun of it on social media. Like, hey guys, it's looked like this when they were sweet too. But I just think you can allocate resources at that position. And the 49ers proved it over the years. Elijah Mitchell, Mostert, Breda, Jeff Wilson Jr. These guys were not like Adrian Peterson and, stalwart names in American society in the sports world, right? No one heard of most of these guys.
Yeah.
None of them. The only guy the Niners have ever allocated a lot of resources, never did shit for them, is now making sweet plays for Andy. Right?
Jarek?
And what do you think Andy did? He's like, well, I got him cheap. Right?
Yeah, they do like kind of the same
But
guy.
He's now been on their team for a couple of years, and Andy likes him. Why? Because he can catch the ball. So I'm torn on it. Like, I think he's going to be good. He's really going to help. But I think when you factor in, like, because there's a difference of, like, Coward went on this rant I saw, like, on this treadmill. He saw it on Twitter. It was like, people get so caught up on, like, the price you pay. Well, if you really want something and you have the assets, who cares what the price you pay? And I tend to agree, especially if you just look at it in terms of football when it comes to, like,
but
you're getting a sweet pass
life in that way.
I agree, but even if you're using like pass rushers or offensive tackles or a guy that's just a position that he's sweet, I think there are certain positions like, what if I told you that the 49ers traded 2 1s for Quentin Nelson? Yeah, he's going to the Hall of Fame maybe one day, but you just traded 2 1s for a guard? Would you feel great about it? Most people would be like, that's insane.
But everyone always talks in sports about being process-oriented. We make process-oriented decisions. But the fact is the results do justify the means in the end. The Rams, did some crazy shit, but they won the championship. So what? Now, the question is, if they stick to that process in the end, will that process doom them, right? F them picks. Like, they won a championship, F and them picks. So how
Well,
can
it's killing them right now.
It's killing them right now, right? But okay, so your process sucks. But they'd be like, well, I got a ring, so our process worked that one time. And Daryl Morey would be like, yeah, but it's the wrong. You can't operate that way. You're playing the percentages. And McVay would be like, yeah, we saw the chance to go win, and we went and won.
But their process worked. Like, I saw them win over. It worked,
but the argument would be, well, the odds are if you do that process for 15 years, it will fail more than it works.
100%. It will bite you in the ass. It's impossible to sustain doing what they were doing. But I think they'd even acknowledge that. We were just all in.
I mean, but the point is, like, they can't continue with that process forever.
And they were just willing to do it. No problem, right?
And that's kind of your point on the Niners is like, well, okay, you wanted the asset, you got the asset. Here's the thing. It doesn't, as long as they can find another way to fixing the other problems they have, if there's another path to fixing the problems, fine. But I think what you're saying is it's hard to see the path right now to fixing their offensive, to finding a right tackle next year. Right.
Yeah. And part of it, let's just assume Jimmy's not on the team and they Trey Lance the starter and they're utilizing his quote unquote cap space. You would say use that extra resources not on the running back position, correct? Right. Like if Christian McCaffrey was a free agent and there was like a sweet D tackle, a sweet guard, like another sweet corner, you'd be like, well, go after those guys over Christian McCaffrey. Assuming you just have to spend money, right? If you had to prioritize, like I just gave you some, whoever the top D tackle pass rusher is that they could afford, the top guard or right tackle that they could afford, and Christian McCaffrey, you would choose those other positions over Christian McCaffrey.
Yes. If you told me a starter at that position over him. But
yeah.
This is partly, not to get too big picture, it's partly a Trey Lance thing. Like you're banking on, part of drafting Trey Lance was you watch the Chiefs, you watch the Bills, you're going to get a quarterback that can make up for some of your deficiencies.
Do you remember when...
and they still need, they badly need that. They need the quarterback that can make plays, broken plays, do things on the field that overcome bad play calls, missed blocks. Like ultimately, Andy Reid, the best offensive coach of the era, Patrick Mahomes still erases mistakes and erases good plays by the defense.
Let's use an example. The Chiefs, who now to me are kind of the standard in the league. How they recently started acquiring people around their superstar rocket ship quarterback. The year Jeff Schwartz's brother gets hurt and Eric Fisher's career just kind of ends. He tears his Achilles, right? They lose both those two tackles. They need a new tackle. What do? They made a pretty bold trade for Orlando Brown because he refused to go back to right tackle when Ronnie Stanley was coming back. So they traded all these picks. Remember, it was a crazy pick swap, and it turned out to be like a second and a third or whatever to get Orlando Brown. Then they trade Tyreek Hill so they have extra assets, right? They have multiple first-round picks. They have their own, and then they have the pick of Tyreek from Miami. What positions do they use that on? A corner and a pass rusher, right? A corner and a pass rusher. So in the last year, when they've acquired stuff, they made a trade for a left tackle, a corner, and a pass rusher that they allocated their resources for. And a couple years ago, when they used at the end of the first round on Clyde, which has kind of had a weird career, I bet if you ask them, they're like, we shouldn't have done that. We shouldn't have, even though we really like the guy. Obviously, he hasn't lived up to the hype, even though he was fucking awesome at LSU. I understand really liking him. We all liked him. If you watched LSU play, he was sweet. But we have proven, who did they name their starting running back today? This morning, I look on Twitter. It's like, Pacheco's going to start. Where did they get him? 7th round. Who did they throw the ball to today? Jerick McKinnon. Where did they get him? Off the scrap heap. It's like you can find that position. Good offensive coaches find that position for really cheap. Yeah. You don't need to make trade for it. You do not need to draft guys high. You just don't need to do it. Yesterday, when Sark blew another game, his best player by far is the running back. And that running back's going to get drafted really high. But when the team that drafts that guy really high, should you? Like the Steelers. Najee Harris is awesome. They use the 23rd pick on him. And it's like they're getting their ass kicked again. They're about to be 2-5.
I'm watching UCLA and Zach Charbonnet thinking, where's he going to get drafted?
You've watched him closer than me. Like when I've watched him, he looks pretty sweet, but is he probably like a 3rd round pick?
Well,
Like,
because he plays running back, but I think he's like he'd be perfect for Kyle Shanahan. He's smart. He runs his ass off. He's hard to tackle. He's one cut and go, and he catches the football. So would you have just been able to get that guy with one of the picks you sent away? Yes. But as Rip and Josh says, we're debating something that hasn't happened. If McCaffrey's healthy for the next 3 years, it'll be a steal. If he's injured next week, it'll be a waste. Somebody said, what does that have to do with Mech says, what does trade capital have to do anything with what happened against Kansas City today? McCaffrey's been on the team for 2 whole days. I mean, this is part of it. What happens this year with the team and with McCaffrey affects the way you look at this trade, right? Whatever happens next year happens next year. Von Miller and they won the title. So does Christian McCaffrey help you win games?
They win the title. Of course, it's a good deal.
Yeah. But I just think like ultimately
they got to the NFC Championship game last year with rando running backs.
I thought Christian made them a little better today because he made some plays. Like they got multiple big runs from 2 different running backs in the game, Jeff Wilson and Christian McCaffrey. Hadn't been happening. And I think you're partly protecting against the possibility that you get a running back hurt and Jeff Wilson gets hurt. And now what? Right. I think that's part of why you do that deal. But ultimately, they've got a hole to dig themselves out of. And Christian McCaffrey, he's not a right tackle and he's not a safety and he's not an interior defensive lineman, but they got to find a way to make him make an impact for them. And one place I do think he can do it, they have struggled in the red zone, John. This is not just a Chiefs problem for the Niners.
No.
Christian McCaffrey has to score red zone touchdowns for the 49ers. He's not Lendale White, but he's got to score red zone touchdowns for the 49ers. I mean, that to me is like outside of some of the other stuff we've talked about, a very specific way they can make him worth what they paid.
Do they score in the second half of games? Doesn't really feel like they do.
Well, if you could like run the opening script and then give the other coaching staff like the Men in Black light and then just run the opening script again, they'd average 40 a game. By the way, while we were talking, I just did some quick scoring is down in the league.
I saw someone break down like the quarterback, the touchdowns are way down, the passing yards are down.
All the Shanahan guys right here just trying to run everybody to death, John. But like right now,
26. It ain't a problem for Pistol Pete up in fucking Seattle. I'll tell you that much.
I know.
37 today, guy.
I know. And what they score last week? 45.
It feels like they've had multiple like 3+ games over 35. Their last week. They just cruised the Cardinal victory 19-9, but they did lose to the Saints 39-32. They beat the Lions 48-45.
That's the game I'm thinking of. Okay, that was a while ago. They're top 10 in scoring right now, but that's why I looked it up, is because top 10 in scoring right now is, this year 24 points per game is 10th. Last year 28 was 10th. So points are down across the board in the league. But
what I was watching, I only watched a little bit of it, but when I've watched Seattle play well, there's like a looseness to them, and maybe it's just because there are no expectations. So that helps. There is, I don't know, is the Yankee game on right now?
Yeah.
Did you see that it was $20 get in price? And obviously, to me, they are fundamentally flawed. You have to be able to just get a base hit and start a fucking rally in the playoffs. Like
their first round win, right, was the lowest batting average ever by a team that won a series.
It's impossible to win like the way they play in the playoffs. It's pretty clear when you face
and their bullpen is not great.
So I do wonder. I've lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You watched the Yankees $20 to get pressure on the Seahawks.
Okay, and I do think, and you see this just in playoff baseball, but to me the Padres just got beat. I didn't think they looked tight. The Yankees look tight.
Yeah,
like they just look tight, and there are elements when things start going wrong a little bit, and maybe this is Jimmy, Kyle, the combination. It just gets tight fast. Like you said, there's just a rhyme or reason to everything Andy's doing.